Daniel never thought he would share a room with an alien. Not in this lifetime, not in this small corner of Earth, not in a regular student dormitory with peeling paint and buzzing fluorescent lights. Yet there he was, sitting on his narrow bed, with his suitcase still half unpacked, staring at the tall figure across the room. Cal. That was his name. Simple, only one syllable, though Daniel had been told his true name in his own language was a long stream of sounds that no human throat could ever copy. When the university paired them together as roommates, Daniel had laughed nervously, assuming it was some kind of mistake. But it wasn't. Cale was real as the cool evening air drifting through the cracked dorm window. He looked nothing like a human, but somehow familiar. His skin shimmered faintly, like polished stone catching sunlight. Not gray, not silver, but something between, alive, shifting with subtle tones when he moved. His hair was dark, almost black, but when the light hit, it glowed faintly, blue, and his eyes were what unsettled Daniel most. Deep violet, almost glowing, they seemed to look through things, not at them. When Cale first arrived, Daniel didn't know how to act. He stood there stiffly, offering an awkward handshake, which Cale studied for a second before copying with surprising gentleness. His hand was cool, not cold, and stronger than Daniel expected. They both smiled, but it was the kind of smile that hid nervousness. The first nights were quiet. Daniel would lie on his bed, scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice Cale examining human objects with intense curiosity. A lamp, a stapler, even a pair of sneakers. Cale would hold them up like treasures, tilting his head as if he were reading stories hidden in their shapes. Sometimes he asked questions in his careful, measured English. Why do humans wear shoes inside, but sometimes not? Why do humans drink hot water with leaves? Tea? Why do humans cry when they are not in pain? Daniel didn't always know how to answer. Sometimes he laughed, sometimes he stumbled over his words, but little by little the silence faded. One night, they talked until 2 a.m. Daniel told Kyle about growing up in a small town, about his family, about how he always felt invisible in crowds. Cale listened with an intensity no human friend had ever given him. In return, Cale shared pieces of his world, a planet where oceans glowed at night, where voices could carry for miles through the thin air, where children learned history by touching the memories carved into crystal. Daniel often wondered why Cale chose Earth. Cale explained once softly, to learn what makes humans strong, not your weapons, not your machines, something else. Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He never thought of himself as strong. Living together wasn't always easy. Daniel worried about saying the wrong thing, about breaking some alien custom he didn't understand. But Cale was patient. When Daniel forgot to clean his side of the room, Cale simply tidied quietly without complaint. When Daniel blared music too loud, Cale tilted his head and said, "Strange sounds, but I like them." Slowly, Daniel stopped seeing Cale as the alien and started seeing him simply as Cale, a friend, a presence who made the room feel less empty. Yet under it all, Daniel carried a knot of insecurity. He had always been shy, always unsure of his worth. Around Cale, with his flawless posture and unearthly calm, Daniel felt clumsy, human, ordinary. He never thought much about it, until the day everything changed. That morning started like any other, the faint hum of students outside, the smell of cheap coffee drifting through the hall. Daniel thought Cale had already left for class. He hummed under his breath, grabbed a towel, and stepped into the shower. Steam filled the tiny bathroom, washing away the weight of sleep. For a brief moment he felt free. Just water, warmth, and his own skin. When he returned to the room, towel loose around his shoulders, droplets still clinging to his chest, he didn't expect anyone there. But the door slid open at that exact moment and Cale stepped in, and in a single heartbeat, Daniel's world shifted forever. The door opened with a soft click, and Daniel froze. His skin was still wet from the shower, a towel hanging loosely around his shoulders. He thought Cale had gone to class. He thought he was alone. But there he was. Cale, tall and calm, stepping into the room as if nothing unusual had happened. For a few seconds, time seemed to stop. Daniel's brain screamed at him to move, to hide, but his body refused to obey. Drops of water slid down his chest, each one reminding him he was completely exposed. "Cale!" Daniel shouted, his voice sharp with panic. He grabbed for the blanket on his bed and pulled it clumsily around his waist. "You can't just walk in like that. What the hell, man?" Kyle didn't move. His violet eyes were wide, but not in shock. Not in embarrassment either. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on Daniel with a strange intensity, like someone seeing a rare painting for the first time. Daniel's cheeks burned, his stomach knotted. Every insecurity he carried came rushing to the surface. His crooked shoulder, his soft belly, the pale scars across his skin. He had always hated being seen even by himself. Now he was being seen by someone not even human. "Don't look at me like that," Daniel muttered, pulling the blanket tighter. His voice cracked with shame. "It's not funny." But Kyle didn't laugh. He didn't look away either. Slowly, carefully he spoke. "I am not laughing." Daniel's breath caught. Something about the way Cale said it, calm, sincere, almost reverent, made his chest tighten. "Then what are you doing?" Daniel asked, his voice low, trembling. Kyle tilted his head slightly, his silver skin catching the light. "I am seeing you." The words hit Daniel harder than he expected. He wanted to argue, to push Cale away, but his throat felt locked. Nobody had ever said something like that to him before. People had looked at him, yes, but not like this. Not as though he mattered. Not as though his body, his flawed, ordinary body, was worth looking at. "You don't get it," Daniel whispered, shaking his head. We don't just stand there naked in front of each other. It's wrong. It's embarrassing. He trailed off, searching for words. Cale's eyes softened. He took a small step closer, but not too close, as if he didn't want to frighten Daniel. "On my world, the body is not shame, it is truth. Every line, every mark tells a story. When I look at you, I do not see weakness. I see life. I see courage. And..." He paused as if choosing carefully. "I see beauty." Daniel's heart thudded painfully. Beauty? Him? The word sounded foreign, impossible, like Cale had spoken in another language. Daniel wanted to laugh it off, to deny it, but the lump in his throat stopped him. His eyes stung, though he didn't understand why. "Nobody's ever said that to me," Daniel whispered almost to himself. Cale's expression softened further. He placed a hand gently on his chest in that alien gesture of truth. "Then they have never spoken honestly." Daniel's vision blurred. His hands trembled as he clutched the blanket tighter. He didn't know what to feel: anger, shame, or something dangerously close to hope. Kyle's words weren't playful, weren't mocking. They carried no hidden agenda. They were spoken like a fact, as simple as saying the sky was blue. And that terrified Daniel more than anything. "Please," Daniel finally said, his voice breaking. "Just don't look at me like that." Kyle's gaze lingered for a heartbeat longer, steady and calm. Then slowly, he lowered his eyes. "Forgive me. I did not mean harm." He turned, his movements graceful, and left the room without another word. The door clicked shut and Daniel collapsed onto his bed, clutching the blanket as though it could shield him from the memory. But it couldn't. He could still feel it. Cale's eyes on him. Not judging, not laughing. Just seeing. And in that seeing, Daniel had felt something he didn't know how to handle. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, he was worth more than he believed. That night, as Daniel lay awake, the dorm felt heavier, quieter, more alive. Across the room, Cale said nothing and Daniel couldn't bring himself to speak either. But in his chest, the memory of that moment refused to fade. For the first time in his life, Daniel had been exposed. And for reasons he couldn't understand, it hadn't destroyed him, it had changed him. Daniel stood frozen, blanket clutched to his chest, his heart beating so loud he thought Kyle might hear it. The air between them was heavy, alive, almost vibrating. He expected Kale to turn away, to apologize, to act embarrassed. That would have been normal. That would have been safe. But Kale didn't move. His violet eyes remained fixed on Daniel, unblinking, glowing faintly in the morning light. There was no shame in them, no mockery. Instead, there was something Daniel had never seen before. Awe. Pure, unguarded awe. Daniel's stomach twisted. Don't look at me like that," he muttered, pulling the blanket tighter. His cheeks burned hot. "It's not funny." Cal tilted his head slightly, the way he always did when he didn't understand a human reaction. His voice came soft, careful, almost reverent. "I am not laughing." "Then what are you doing?" Daniel shot back, his voice shaking. Kyle hesitated, then said in a tone that carried no doubt, "I am seeing you." The words struck Daniel like a blow. Seeing him? People looked at him every day. Professors, classmates, strangers passing on. The street. But no one had ever seen him. Not like that. Not as if his very existence was worth memorizing. Daniel tried to retreat into anger, into sarcasm, into anything that would hide the trembling in his hands. You're messing with me. You don't get it. Humans don't stand there naked in front of each other. It's not done." Cale took a slow step closer, his expression unreadable. "On my world, the form of a person is sacred. It is the first story you carry, the one no one can erase. When I look at you, I see strength. I see survival. I see beauty." The last word caught in Daniel's ears and refused to let go. Beauty. Him? He almost laughed, but the sound died in his throat. He wanted to argue, to list all the ways his body was wrong. The crooked shoulder from an old injury, the soft belly he never managed to flatten, the scars he never explained. But Cale looked at him as if none of that mattered. Or maybe, as if those very things were what made him beautiful. Daniel's voice cracked when he whispered, "Nobody's ever said that to me." Cale's gaze softened. He placed a hand gently against his own chest. The alien gesture Daniel had learned meant sincerity. "Then no one has spoken truth to you?" Daniel felt his throat tighten. He wanted to hide, wanted to disappear, but a small part of him, tiny, fragile, wanted to believe Cale, wanted to accept the impossible idea that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth admiring in him. The silence stretched, heavy but not uncomfortable. Daniel sat slowly on the edge of the bed, the blanket still clutched around him, his heart a storm. Kyle didn't move closer, didn't press. He simply stayed, watching, present. At last, Daniel found his voice again. "You shouldn't say things like that. You don't know what they mean to me." "I know," Kyle said quietly. "That is why I say them." Daniel looked away, blinking hard, trying to steady himself. His mind swirled with confusion, with fear, with something he couldn't quite name. All he knew was that Cale's gaze had unsettled something deep inside him, something he thought had died long ago, the desire to be seen, to be valued, not for what he could do, but for who he was. The rest of the morning passed in silence. Cale sat at his desk, scribbling notes in his strange curling script while Daniel dressed quickly, avoiding mirrors. But even as he left for class, the memory of Cale's eyes followed him. Violet, unblinking, filled not with judgment, but with wonder. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His body felt different, not in shape or size, but in meaning. For the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe he had been wrong all along. Maybe his flaws weren't curses. Maybe they were chapters in his story. And somewhere in the darkness, Cale's quiet words replayed in his mind. I am seeing you. Daniel wasn't sure if he was ready for that, but he knew one thing. He would never forget the look in those violet eyes. The accident should have been easy to forget. Just one moment of embarrassment, the kind of awkward slip people laugh about later. But for Daniel, it was impossible to push from his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Cale's expression again. Calm, reverent, steady. Not mocking, not shocked, just seeing. And that unsettled him more than anything. For days, Daniel avoided Cale as much as possible. He left for class early, came back late, and always kept his blanket or clothes between them. He even started showering at odd hours just to make sure Cale wouldn't walk in. He told himself it was about privacy, about avoiding more humiliation. But deep down he knew the truth. He wasn't running from exposure, he was running from Cale's eyes. Those violet eyes had burned into him, carrying a weight he didn't understand. Cale hadn't looked at him with disgust. He hadn't looked at him like an object either. He had looked at him like a miracle, and Daniel didn't know how to live with that. At night, the silence in the dorm grew louder than ever. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, while Cale worked quietly at his desk. Sometimes Daniel would glance across the room and catch Cale, looking at him, but not in a way that felt invasive. More like Cale was waiting, patient, steady, as though he knew Daniel would speak when he was ready. But Daniel wasn't ready. Not yet. The silence stretched on for nearly a week, heavy and uncomfortable. Daniel hated it. He missed their late-night conversations, the way Cale would ask strange questions about human life, the way he listened so carefully. Now the room felt cold, like a friendship cut in half. Finally, one evening, Cale broke the quiet. His voice was soft, hesitant, almost fragile. Did I hurt you? Daniel's chest tightened. He had been waiting for this, dreading it. He sat up in bed, rubbing his hands over his face. No, you didn't hurt me. Cale tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Then why do you avoid me? Daniel's throat went dry. He wanted to say something simple, something easy, like, I'm busy or I just need space. But the truth pressed heavy on his chest. He exhaled shakily. Because you surprised me. You looked at me in a way nobody ever has. I didn't know what to do. Kyle was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I did not mean to make you uncomfortable, but where I come from, when we see beauty, we speak it. To remain silent would be a lie. Daniel laughed bitterly, though his eyes stung. Beauty? Me? You don't know what you're saying. Humans don't look at me that way. Not ever. If they do, it's usually to point out what's wrong. Kyle leaned forward, his violet gaze steady. Humans see only with eyes trained by habit. I see with truth. You are more than the surface you despise. The words hit Daniel hard. He felt his chest ache, as though Cale's voice had touched something buried deep inside. For years, Daniel had carried the weight of not being enough. Not thin enough, not strong enough, not handsome enough. He had believed those lies so long, they had become his truth. And now here was Cale, an alien who had known him only a short while, speaking as though those lies had never existed. Daniel turned away, blinking back the sting in his eyes. You make it sound so simple. Cale didn't argue. He only said, it is simple. It is humans who make it hard. The room went quiet again, but this time, the silence was different. Not heavy, not cold. It was softer, warmer, like a pause, between words. That night, Daniel didn't feel quite as distant. He still couldn't fully believe Cale's words, but a seed had been planted. Small, fragile, but alive. And for the first time in a long while, Daniel wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was another way to see himself. The next few days moved slowly, like walking through heavy water. Daniel tried to act normal, but inside he was tangled. He caught himself glancing at Cale when he thought he wasn't looking, only to find those violet eyes already on him. Calm, patient, waiting. It wasn't the kind of staring that made you uncomfortable. It was the kind that said, "I see you. I am not going anywhere." Daniel didn't know what to do with that. No one had ever looked at him like that before. People had looked through him, past him, sometimes even down on him. But never like Cale did, with steady admiration, as though his very existence was worth studying. One night, the silence between them broke again. It was late, the campus outside quiet, the window open to the soft sound of wind. Cale sat by the window, his silver skin glowing faintly in the moonlight, while Daniel lay restless in bed, turning from side to side. Finally, Cale spoke, his voice gentle. "You carry much pain." Daniel froze. "What?" Cale's eyes reflected the moonlight, almost glowing. "When I saw you that day, you tried to hide. Not only your body, you were hiding your story." "Why?" Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to brush it off, to say something sarcastic, to change the subject. But Cale's voice was soft, sincere. It wasn't a demand. It was an invitation. He sat up slowly, hugging his knees to his chest. His voice came out small. "Because my story isn't something people want to see." Cale tilted his head. "I wanted to see it." The words cracked something inside Daniel. His chest felt tight, heavy, like a dam breaking. "You don't get it," he whispered. "I've spent my whole life being told I'm not enough, not smart enough, not strong enough, not good-looking enough. I learned to hide myself because if I didn't, someone would point out everything wrong, every scar, every flaw, every weakness." Cale listened without interrupting, his gaze steady and warm. Daniel's voice shook as he went on. "That day, when you walked in, I felt like my biggest fear came true. Someone saw me naked with nothing to hide behind. And instead of laughing or judging you," he trailed off, tears burning in his eyes. "You looked at me like I was worth something, and I didn't know how to handle it." The silence stretched, heavy but not empty. Cale finally rose from his chair and crossed the room slowly, his movements careful. He stopped a few steps away, lowering himself to sit on the floor so he wouldn't tower over Daniel. His voice was low, almost reverent. "On my world," Cale began, "we are taught that the body tells the truth of a person. Every mark, every line, every scar is proof of living. Strength is not in hiding them, it is in carrying them with pride. When I looked at you, I did not see weakness. I saw survival, I saw courage, and yes," his eyes softened, "I saw beauty." Daniel covered his face with his hands. The tears slipped out before he could stop them. No one had ever said words like that to him. No one had ever dared to call him beautiful and mean it. He had spent years believing he was less, believing he needed to shrink and disappear, and now Cale, someone not even human, was telling him the exact opposite. "I don't know how to believe you," Daniel whispered through his tears. Cale reached out, but stopped short of touching him, leaving the choice to Daniel. His voice was soft, steady. "Then let me believe for you, until you can." Daniel lowered his hand slowly, meeting those violet eyes through blurred vision. Something in Cale's expression broke through the walls he had built around himself. It wasn't pity. It wasn't kindness for the sake of kindness. It was truth. Unshakable, patient truth. In that moment, Daniel realized something that scared him even more than being seen naked. Cale wasn't lying. He truly believed every word. And for the first time in his life, Daniel felt the fragile spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as worthless as he thought. The next morning began quietly. Sunlight spilled through the narrow dorm window, laying a soft golden glow across the room. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror above his desk. He was shirtless, his chest bare, his scars visible in the morning light. Normally, he would have turned away, pulled on a shirt quickly, and hidden the parts of himself he didn't want to see. But today felt different. He could still hear Cale's voice from the night before. "Let me believe for you, until you can." Those words had settled deep inside him, like seeds planted in soil he thought was barren. And now, as he looked at himself in the mirror, he didn't only see flaws. He saw a story. A crooked shoulder from a childhood accident. A scar from when he fell off his bike as a teenager. The softness in his stomach that came from nights of comfort food after long, lonely days. He saw all the things he used to hate, but also, for the first time, he wondered if Cale was right. Maybe these weren't marks of weakness. Maybe they were proof that he had lived, endured, and survived. Cale was at his desk, writing in his strange script, the letters curling like rivers on paper. He didn't say anything, but Daniel felt his presence, steady and patient. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice quiet. "Do you really mean it? What you said last night?" Cale looked up, his violet eyes soft. "With all that I am." Daniel swallowed. He wanted to believe him. He wanted to step into that truth, even if it scared him. Slowly, almost painfully, he lowered the shirt he had been holding. He stayed there, bare-chested, letting the sunlight fall across his skin. His heart raced as if he were standing on a cliff's edge, about to leap. Cale's eyes lifted from his notes. For a moment, he simply looked, and then he smiled. It was small, gentle, but it held a kind of reverence Daniel didn't know how to face. "You carry yourself differently," Cale said softly. "Today you are not hiding." Daniel's lips trembled into a half-smile. "I'm trying." Kyle rose from his chair and stepped closer, but not too close, never enough to overwhelm. He simply stood there, his presence calm, his voice steady. That is all courage is. Trying, even when afraid. Daniel exhaled shakily. The words sank deep, warming places in him he thought were frozen. The rest of the day carried a strange new energy. Daniel found himself walking across campus with his shoulders less hunched, his steps less heavy. He still felt insecure, still caught himself tugging at his clothes, but every time doubt whispered, he remembered Cale's voice. "Let me believe for you." And somehow, it helped. That evening, back in the dorm, Daniel sat on his bed while Cale prepared his notes for class. The room felt different now, warmer, lighter. Daniel spoke quietly, almost as if confessing to himself. "You know, when you first came here, I thought you were perfect. Everything about you, your posture, your calm, even your skin. You looked like you didn't carry flaws the way humans do." Kyle's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I carry mine differently. But they are there." Daniel blinked. "What do you mean?" Kyle tapped his chest lightly. "On my world, we do not hide our scars. We wear them as light. My body shows no mark on the surface, but here." He pressed his hand against his heart. "I carry wounds no eyes can see. Every being does." Daniel stared, struck silent. Somehow hearing that made Cale feel less like an untouchable figure and more like a friend, like someone who understood. The room grew quiet again, but it wasn't the heavy silence from before. It was gentle, comforting. Daniel leaned back on his bed, his blanket falling loosely around him, and for the first time, he didn't feel the need to hide. And Kyle, with his calm, violet gaze, looked at him not with shock, not with pity, but with the same truth as always. In that moment, Daniel realized he had a choice. He could keep running from himself, or he could try, just try, to believe what Kyle saw. And for the first time, he leaned toward the second. Days turned into weeks, and the tension that once filled the dorm faded like mist in sunlight. Daniel no longer rushed to cover himself every time he moved around the room. He still wore clothes, of course, but there was a difference in the way he carried himself. His shoulders weren't always hunched. His steps weren't always small. He was learning, slowly, to let himself be seen. Kale noticed the change but never commented too much. He didn't need to. His steady gaze and quiet presence were enough. Every now and then, when Daniel dared to meet those violet eyes, he saw the same truth shining back. You are worthy. You are enough. One evening, after a long day of classes, Daniel sat by the window watching the campus below. Students laughed, some carrying books, others rushing to dinner. He thought about how different he felt now compared to when Kale first arrived. Back then, he had seen himself as invisible, ordinary, a shadow in the crowd. But Kale had changed that, not by fixing him, not by forcing him, but by simply seeing him. Breaking the silence, Daniel spoke softly. Do you know what's strange? Kale looked up from his notes. What is strange? Daniel smiled faintly, though there was a tremor in it. All my life I thought being human meant being weak, flawed, always compared to others. But you, someone from another world, you looked at me and saw something worth admiring. And that makes me feel stronger than I've ever been. Kale's eyes softened, glowing gently in the lamplight. He placed his hand over his chest in that familiar gesture of sincerity. That is what makes humanity powerful. Not the weapons your species builds, not the machines. It is your spirit. Even when broken, even when doubting, you rise again. That is why I came here. To learn this. Daniel's throat tightened. He had never thought of himself as strong, but hearing Kale say it, believing it, made something deep inside him stir. The next day, Daniel walked across campus with a new steadiness. He wasn't arrogant, wasn't suddenly brimming with confidence, but his steps carried a quiet strength. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to hide. When he caught his reflection in a glass window, he didn't immediately look away. He saw himself, flawed, imperfect, but alive. And that was enough. That evening, back in the dorm, Daniel turned to Kale, who was once again bent over his notes. You know, Daniel said, his voice soft but steady. I think I get it now. Kale looked up, curious. Get what? Daniel smiled. It wasn't forced this time. It was real, gentle, and sure. What it means to be seen. What it means to be human. Not perfect, not flawless, just enough. Kale's lips curved into a small smile. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he simply nodded, his violet eyes shining with quiet pride. The room fell into silence again, but it was no longer heavy. It was the silence of understanding, of two souls sharing something beyond words. That night, as Daniel lay in bed, he thought about everything that had happened. The accident, the shame, the fear, the confession, the choice. It all led to this moment, this feeling. For the first time in his life, he wasn't haunted by the thought of being less. He wasn't crushed by the weight of comparison. He had been seen, truly seen, and he had survived it. More than survived, he had grown from it. And in that quiet realization, Daniel finally understood the truth of an old saying he had always ignored. Humanity is special, not because it hides its flaws, but because it dares to carry them openly. Kyle had come across light years to learn from humans. But in the end, Daniel realized something even greater. Sometimes the bravest act was simply to stand in the light, unhidden, and let yourself be loved.